Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Kane's independent media production. Today we're continuing our foray into 1-ply versus 2-ply. Today we're doing tom batters. If you've been with us so far on this experience of figuring out exactly how these two different sorts of heads behave on the different drums in the kit, you will know that we had surprises in the snare and we also had surprises in the bass drum. More surprises, for me at least, in the bass drum in particular. Tom heads are where I feel like, at least I as a player, have experimented the most with different plies because I've noticed them giving really significantly different sounds and also offering different kinds of versatility within a single drumhead choice. Today, as with those previous videos, we're going just as clean as we can, 1-ply versus 2, and today's choices are going to be coded G1s and coded G2s. The methodology for today's experiment is that we're taking our 1-ply setup, tuning it optimally for sound, going through 3 different tunings, and then we're going to swap out and start over with the 2-ply batters and tuning through low, medium, and high to the same pitches that we use for the 1-ply setup. This doesn't necessarily mean that we're tuning optimally for the 2-ply. What it means is we want to hear 1-ply optimized and then compare 2-ply to that same scenario. And then if we were in a performance situation, we might make a little bit of adjustment after that to perfect it. But this is more about the comparison under the same circumstances. It's important to note also, which isn't always the case with what we do here, we are adjusting the resos through all 3 of these tunings on both setups as well, not just the batters. The pitches of the resos in the 1-ply experiment are going to be exactly the same as the pitches on the 2-ply. We're going to start with low tunings today, and this, again, very important opportunity to grab your headphones because the differences, especially in the low end, is going to be very, very subtle and worth checking out with as much articulation as you possibly can get. The single ply choice here, the G1, is giving us clean attack, clean decay, articulate sounds, a lot of tone, fair amount of sustain, pretty much exactly what I was expecting from a single ply head on these drums. The trade-off with tuning thin heads, 1-ply heads, at this low level is that we're losing a fair amount of rebound, and we're going to work a little bit harder to play faster things to make sure that your wrists are in shape because they're going to be doing an awful lot of the work. Let's hear a little more of the single ply. Let's hear a little bit more of the 1-ply. Depending on the music that you're making, if you're tuning one-ply heads this low, you may also run into durability issues if you're really digging in. Adjustments to setup and different things like that, and stick choices can affect that a fair amount, but it is worth noting that with one-ply, you are going to experience faster wear out pretty much across the board. The 2-ply G2 gives us a lot of what we're getting from the 1-ply head, but the character of the decay and the overall feel of the head is fairly different. In listening back to these two back to back, the 2-ply head has a little bit less of a linear decay on it. The envelope after that initial transient holds on to the low end for a moment before dropping off, which is really nice, especially for faster, beefier, more aggressive playing, because we're not losing the low end as we start to play faster. Because of that behavior of the decay with these heads, coupled with the durability and overall mass of them compared to the 1-ply, these are the choice for low tuning. They're going to live longer, they give you more out of every transient, and most importantly for me, they feel much better. They're a little bit stiffer. I start to feel like I can play more articulately, low dynamics, and also super aggressively on them because they are giving me more back at this tension because of the added mass of the 2nd ply. Let's hear a little bit more of the 2-ply. Now for our middle tuning, we've brought both the batter and the reso up for both the 1-ply and the 2-ply setups. This range is where the two different head setups sound the most similar to me, both in the recording and as I'm playing here. The larger difference between the two is the feel when you're actually striking the drums. The 1-ply setup really sings in this range. This is sort of what I do in terms of optimal range if I'm playing a 12 and a 16. They give a lot back and they have incredible articulation all the way down to a very low dynamic. And at the same time, I feel like I can hit them very hard and they will still give me back a lot of low end, a lot of mids, and a lot of clarity no matter how much energy I put into them. With the 1-ply setup, everything actually got louder and larger sounding, again, both in the recording and where I'm sitting because of the added tension to the batter and the reso. This is one of those situations where you can have a kind of diminishing returns experience if you're tuning super low to get a super low sound. Sometimes it actually makes sense to raise everything up a little bit higher so that you can get the heads to really speak and really interact and give you back some of those dynamics that's going to translate into the microphones and the band and everything. Let's hear a little bit more of the one ply at this tuning. With the two-ply head at this tuning, we have a few subtle and few not so subtle things that are different. The primary thing that I'm experiencing here is that the feel on the toms at this tension is a little bit stiffer than the one-ply, which makes me feel like I'm getting more rebound, a little more kind of clarity out of the drums, especially at lower dynamics. And overall, they're giving me back a lot of energy when I hit them physically into the stick. Secondarily, and similarly to the very low tuning, the low end is immediate on the attack, and then it hangs out for longer rather than dipping off immediately as it does with the single ply heads, which makes it super fun to play tom-oriented beats, tribal things, punk stuff, because I'm feeling so much energy and low end coming off of the drums with every strike. As with the one ply at this tension, we are also getting a lot more energy in general out of the drums. The projection of the fullness of the drums is much more powerful at this tuning than it was at the very, very low tuning. It's overall a larger sound, and it's getting to the audience and the mics and to you, the player, much more significantly than with the lower tuning. Let's hear a little more of the two ply at this tension. And finally, now we're going to go for a high tuning. Almost bebop range. Again, we're playing our rock drums today, but we do want to see what these things will do when we start to really crank them into the stratosphere. Right out of the gate, the one ply is winning at this tension for a few reasons, not totally unexpected. The energy out of the drum at this tension with single ply heads, the dynamics, the clarity at low volumes, you really can't beat it. It's really fantastic. They do also still have a lot of room to grow as we start to hit them harder and harder and harder, which oftentimes isn't what you would necessarily choose to do with drums that are tuned this high, but with one ply heads, you can absolutely get away with it. Lots of dynamic range. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I oftentimes like to tune the toms high like this for situations where I want to emulate hand drums and different kinds of ethnic percussion, and it allows me to play rim shots on the toms. It allows me to use a lot of different parts of the tom for overtones and things, the floor tom as well in this case, and for opportunities to get away from the sort of normal, expected, modern drum sound. This is a really fun thing to experiment with. Even one-ply heads have a limit, and we're not getting these into a choking range yet. It's totally possible to choke them out just with tension on the drum. They could go higher than this, but if you're thinking in terms of experimenting with how high you can go, starting with one-ply heads is definitely the thing to do. Let's hear a little bit more of the one-ply way up here. Now we've found the place where the two-ply is starting to let us down a little bit. The rack tom is definitely starting to choke out. It's starting to feel kind of terrible, starting to behave a little bit strangely in terms of what I'm expecting to get back when I take a swing at it. Overall, we're getting boxy, we're getting choked. It's really starting to not be a very musical sound. Conversely, with the floor tom, it's actually a fairly good sound as long as I hit it off center, which is pretty overtone laden, maybe not the sound that you're looking for. If I hit the floor tom right in the center, it absolutely chokes. It's like phase cancellation. I hit it, it just does nothing. And this is owed mainly to the mass that we're dealing with, but also a couple of other factors. This is owed to the fact that the pitches of all of the heads today remained the same as we moved from one-ply batters to two-ply batters. The choking that we're experiencing in the rack tom and the sort of different choking that we're experiencing in the floor tom could be remedied with some adjustments to the reso or some slight adjustments to the batter depending on what we're dealing with interval-wise between those heads. But suffice to say, we really wanted to just stick inside of matching the tensions on everything so that we could see how they would behave under the exact same circumstances. On the flip side, we are still dealing with two-ply heads here, so if durability at higher tunings is something that you really need for the situation that you're in, moving to two-plies could make a lot of sense, provided that you're comfortable with making some adjustments to the reso side, maybe some really subtle ones, and also making sure that if you do those things that they don't move over the course of hitting these drums as hard as you can, because we did experience little shifts today that we adjusted for as we went. It's part of the experiment, and it's worth knowing that going in. Let's hear a little bit more of these cranked up two-plies. The bottom line here is that there is a time and a place for a lot of different kinds of drum heads. There's a best case scenario for everything there is out there pretty much. And one-ply and two-ply are the things that we run into the most, even amongst all of those variables. At the end of the day, one-plies have their space where they are the absolute right choice. Two-plies similarly have a house that they live in where they are the best possible choice for that scenario. And it takes a little bit of experimentation, a little bit of checking it out on our own to figure out what in our lives we should be choosing a one-ply or a two-ply for, depending on the music that we make, where we're playing, who we're playing with, and the way that we physically strike the drums. All right, thank you so much for watching. We had a lot of fun today. I hope you enjoyed it too. If you have a moment, please like and comment and subscribe to our channel today. Hit the notification bell so you hear about our new videos. And please follow the link below if you haven't already to the Patreon to see everything else that we have going on here, particularly the Cymbals series that we're super excited about and have a lot of new things, ideas coming out around that. And lastly, we would love to hear your one-ply versus two-ply choices, what brought you to those, and maybe any situations where you realized you needed to switch because of the context you were playing in.